Okay, welcome to kind of an impromptu stream today. I wasn't necessarily planning on making or doing a stream. I was thinking about recording a video that I would publish later today or tomorrow, but this one is going to take a little precedence. And we'll talk about some logic stuff today. Primarily, one of the newest rumors that has come out about logic from a relatively surprising place, a place that doesn't have a lot of credibility, in my opinion. But we'll talk about it because there's certainly some AI involved with that. And of course, I want to talk about this. I think it's a fairly big announcement. It's not like a massive announcement, though, but it's a fairly big one about Lander and how they are purchasing Reason Studios and what that is going to look like. I think there's some interesting things to talk about with that. And we might dive into Suno just a little bit because Suno is another company that purchased like a web-based DAW recently and turned it into its own little playground for AI music. And I know that AI in general is really controversial for a lot of viewers, and that's because it's a big deal that we should be looking at and discussing how it's going to play into the music industry moving forward, and what they're thinking about doing overall. And I talk about that like it's an entity, but in a way, it's just a bunch of people trying to make a living off music. And I sometimes wonder what that means for some of these tools that are coming out and these collaborations that are coming out. So first and foremost, let's talk about the Logic one first. It was on my stream yesterday. I was talking about using ChatGPT to script in the Logic Pro scripter, which I think is a really cool concept. Only because there's a 0% chance that I'm going to learn how to do JavaScript in my lifetime, right? There's just not. And so the question becomes, if I really want to use that ethically, should I hire somebody who's a software engineer to do the scripting for me? Or should I use a tool like ChatGPT to make the scripts? Anyway, we were doing that and somebody said, hey, did you hear about the revamp of the two synthesizers in Logic? Two of the synthesizers, I should say, Retro Synth and then the ES2, which there's this, I saw it on Reddit, but I think it was someplace else first. And it was somebody who was talking to Gemini, AI chat machine. And I don't know if it was a hallucination or they actually had access to one of the development copies of Logic, or somebody else had let it slip someplace. Because usually even hallucinations on things like Gemini and chat are based on somebody saying it one time and it slipping through as fact. Not usually is it something that is completely fabricated out of thin air at the level of detail that was shared. And so they were talking about how in an upcoming version of Logic, there's going to be new sound engine for, in this case, RetroSynth and the ES2. I'm not sure about other ones, but they're going to start using, the neural engine, and they're going to have a toggle switch that would let you go to the legacy mode or use the neural mode. And it was very detailed. Excuse me. Very detailed and hard to imagine that it was, completely just fabricated out of thin air. That doesn't mean it came from a reliable source. And why are we asking these AI tools about this stuff in the first place? Who knows? I think it just kind of slipped out, or because I went to these tools and asked similar things and it wasn't reproduced. It could be just a bad actor who is, because they're copying and pasting. They didn't show like the actual original sources. Like that's the thing on the internet. You can say whatever you want at any time. They could have suggested to Gemini these things before asking about it. So then they were incorporated. And so it could be somebody who's just starting a rumor mill for no good reason. And so who knows? But that's one of the things I want to talk about today is the role of some of these things in our music production process. And the second thing we're going to talk about, well, as maybe to jump off from that is we're going to look at this announcement from Lander. Let's see if I can make this bigger. No, I'm in the wrong page. Let's do this page. We'll blow this up a little bit. And yeah, so this announcement that Lander is acquires Reason Studios to redefine the future of music. Now, Lander is a Canadian company from Montreal. And so they've acquired Reason, which is Stockholm based. And Reason has been around for a long time. It was around at the very beginning of my career, back when I was a student, like Reason 1.5 and 2 were out. I mean, 1 came out when I was a student as well, but I think I heard of it first after its release. It would come out in all the trade mags where you'd have a full page ad and it would show all the wires when you flip the rack. And it was like a cool thing, right? And it's pretty much, while there has been innovation over the course of its existence, it has kind of kept that small, campy kind of hometown feel. And so some people use it and other people make fun of it. And they haven't had all the features that everybody wanted. I mean, they were late to the game with like VSTs and, it's like cool. But they do something that they do in a really creative way and with a lot of really, kind of defining style. Like if you see a Reason thing, it's Reason. You can't say that about everybody. And so cool, right? It's an interesting program. You don't have to use it. Nobody's telling you to use it. But I've used it and I pay a subscription model every month. The only thing that I think would get more viewers on a live stream than talking about AI right now would be talking about subscription models. That is clearly, I've never seen somebody, maybe once or twice, but it's rare that you ever see a comment on any video or any product or any news announcement where they say, oh, I hope that they make this subscription based. Nobody says that. Nobody thinks that. I personally, in the right circumstances, don't mind subscription models. It's kind of like the fact of the matter, but I think I'm of the age and point in my career where they don't scare me. And I'm not, it's like I see the potential value of it. Meaning, if I'm paying every month, I hope I'm getting something every month. And with Reason Studios, their subscription model, I feel like I've gotten a lot. They have a lot of packs that come out all the time. They do regular updates to the software, although not all the things that I would probably do. So I use it as a rack inside of Logic. I don't use Reason as a standalone workstation. I just use all the instruments and effects and their sound packs, which a lot of their instruments are like world-class, amazing, as good as anybody out there overall. And so cool, right? Cool. It's an interesting thing. This thing with Lander, though, I've been looking around and you don't see a lot of love for this. Everyone thinks that the whole thing will just become 100% subscription base. That was one of the number one comments from everybody. And I don't know. I don't know if it seems like there's been a lot of pushback anytime any company goes to 100% subscription model, minus the AI ones. Like I don't hear, I hear people complaining about Suno, but not for the subscription model. I think people just kind of say, well, that's the thing. There was never a non-subscription model. I still preferred, in many ways, when I got Logic Pro in a box with discs and I had to sit there and install it over an afternoon, right? I miss that like aesthetic of having something. But then again, I'm nostalgic in general. I have been building my vinyl collection and I've got things in closets like 8-track players and cassette decks, and it's like I'm nostalgic for the touching of things. Logic, we don't get that, but that's why I surround myself with things like the Panorama CS12, the Nectar CS12, which is a tactile thing, and I have a 9-fader bank next to it and a keyboard and synthesizers all around me. It's like I like the tactile even when I don't get it from the main part of my studio, which is Logic. Honestly, if they ever came out with the VR version of Logic and it involved gloves that were tactile, I would probably use it. You know, it's like that's cool. I like being able to interact with software in different ways, and that's one of them. So, but this, okay, I'm gonna go off track a bunch probably, but this thing with Lander and Reason is bigger than just Reason becoming subscription model, right? Lander has been known for its work with AI, its mastering assistant, and then its plugins and its other parts. I mean, it does a lot. But a lot of it is AI intertwined, I would say. You can also connect your music directly with Lander to be put up on all the streaming services. So a distribution thing as well. Cool. A couple things I noticed from their announcement. One is they're clearly aware that this is going to be a controversial move. There's no question that they have blinders on. One of the reasons I say that is because they're talking about over and over, our vision is to make Reason and the Reason Rack indispensable tools for every producer, regardless of what DAW they use. Awesome. They talk about how this is a chance to give users and creators more power, freedom, and inspiration. But then they come down, they're like, we're joining, but Reason Studios will continue to operate its own brand, maintaining its products, community, and creative DNA. So they say they're not changing that. They just want to expand the possibilities. This isn't about Reason changing. It's about giving it room to grow while preserving each brand's identity. So cool. This isn't a behind the scenes team of investors who are trying to see if they can build up Reason to sell it again and make a bunch of money. That's clearly not what is currently happening with this. In some ways, that's a good thing. There's some human people, and they have a quote down here from Daniel, VP of Strategy at Lander, who said that they were a Reason user at one point. And so it sounds like somebody who knows what that means if they used it for like 5 minutes and saw it or actually did something with it. But this is a team that at least has some experience in the music industry and understands a little bit of what people want. But who knows what the goal is going into this. I will say if you go to their news and press page on the Lander website, from November 19th, they said that Lander's study uncovers how 87% of artists really use AI, as if they're going to tell us something about how AI isn't so bad. That's the vibe I was getting from that statement. Here's one of the things that stuck out. So it says that the future of AI, the future isn't AI replacing producers. It is producers with AI working like a whole team, survey respondent quote. But if you look down a little deeper, there's like one here. It's like, I use AI as if it was a band of session musicians. Here's the problem. The session musicians then no longer are getting paid or are part of the equation, right? I've used it like that personally on my streams. I've certainly have experimented with it, and sometimes it feels, wow, that was really cool, and other times it's kind of like, could I? I mean, would I have paid a string section to ever play this? And the answer would be no. There's no money lost from my use of AI at this point. I haven't used it in a way where I would have paid somebody previously. Cool. I haven't done it. But that doesn't mean there aren't people who are doing it. And there are probably some people who have budgets who are going to say, let's see if we can't do this and save some money in our budget so we get more in our pockets at the end. Why not? But it's clear that they're trying to say that AI isn't so bad. It's really, just an extension of your own workflow. It's not replacing you as a producer, but maybe your job is not a producer. Maybe your job is as a session musician, and all of a sudden you're not able to get as many gigs as you were before. Or maybe a small independently owned and run recording studio is going to get less work because more people can do the stuff on their phone or laptop without having any skill whatsoever. These are the same conversations we've been having for a long time, though. Meaning, in the 80s and 90s, I remember at some point when drum machines were the talk, it's like, oh, great. Someone invented a thing that replaces the drummer. We still have a lot of drummers playing right now. More than we maybe need every once in a while. As long as we have like couches for them to sleep on, they'll keep on drumming, right? Then it was all the MIDI stuff, MIDI in 83. And then it started like you could sequence, and all of a sudden you didn't have to have full players. And then sample libraries kept on getting better and better. Giga Studio came out and was like realistic. I remember hearing Giga Studio at one of the big conventions, and a piano player was listening and saying, well, I can still hear it's not quite tuned right in the left hand and the bottom register. I'm like, oh my gosh, it sounds incredible. Are you joking? And I bought Giga Studio, or got it for Christmas or something. And then they got bought out and closed down. I was like, oh my gosh, my timing for some of that stuff was always horrible. But it didn't ruin the industry. Having a piano that wasn't an acoustic piano, or having a string section that wasn't a real string section. None of us ever think, wow, that's where the music industry changed and went downhill ever since we got sample libraries. No one's ever said that. And so what we're dealing with, though, is something a little different, because AI can do so much and is really good at it, but there's no regulation. So it's happening at this massive scale right now. The scale is so big and the regulation is so small that they're able to do a lot. I was watching something about YouTube. When YouTube was first released, it was a money pit, right? You could upload stuff for free, You weren't getting paid for anything you did on there, but they were hosting all of this stuff. And it was just like they had investor money and investor money. They were just spending with the goal of seeing which service out there that could do this thing that would get bought by somebody. And YouTube got bought, of course, by Google. And they kept on dumping money into it until they were at such a massive scale that they could use all the data they collected. I think this was Linus Tech Talks, a video like a couple weeks ago that was really diving into this. But they got to such a size with all the data that they collected, and then they figured out how to monetize it, and they're making it work. It's a profitable business until it isn't, but nobody else is close. And so right now we're seeing which of these AI things are going to be able to do that. But, they're selling all this processing power that Suno can do for pennies because they have such a good funding thing. Anybody who says, we've got AI and we're successful, they can go out there and rummage up some money from investors. So someone like Reason Studios can't keep their own doors open because they're not selling enough. Or, would they have ever been in the position they were in if they had been fiscally successful at a level that they would never have needed to be sold to anybody? That's a question I don't know the answer to, but I'm assuming. And so now Lander comes along and says, "Hey, we got some cash sitting around. We got so much cash sitting around. What do we do with it? Let's buy Reason." I'm assuming they bought Reason as opposed to anybody else because maybe more affordable? I don't know. Maybe got a good deal. And we'll see what they do with it. I'm not going to try to predict all of that, but they're going to want to make good on their investment. So hopefully they're going to do some cool things with it. Is it going to become an AI beast that creates things all based on AI stuff? Well, maybe. I don't know. Something that's as complicated as Reason is. And Reason is relatively complicated. Sure, there's some simple parts. The rack, the cables. But a lot of people, my guess is, a lot of people that make fun of Reason, if I were to sit them down in front of a rack with nothing connected and ask them to create some sounds with some of their modules, would be a little bit lost in some ways because it's complicated. There's a lot to it. And I've always felt like there's room for the right company doing this AI stuff to do this in such a way that actually really helps musicians without interfering on the creative process whatsoever. Wouldn't it be nice if you opened up your workstation like Logic and something was wrong, it wasn't working, maybe when you record something, it ends up out of sync, and you could ask the program what's happening and it could tell you? Wouldn't that actually be useful? I could think of probably 50 different use cases of intelligent design of these things that would help us. Instead of asking a young engineer, producer who's just getting into this to figure out buffer sizes. That's something they can learn later and appreciate. But the software could handle the buffer sizes for us. Put a little button series at the top that says, I want to record stuff right now. And it handles all of the latency and stuff to give you the lowest latency without adjusting your experience, right? Maybe you put it in there and it does this quick freeze of the over delayed tracks. And all of a sudden you have a low latency system, right? And then you say, okay, I'm going into the mixing phase. You just click the mixing phase and all of a sudden latency doesn't matter anymore. You can add as much as you want. Our software is capable of this. It's just the stupid idiot designers which somehow seem resistant to doing anything that's actually going to help us. What is wrong? Why can't they fix the simple, stupid issues and make our workflow even better? Those things have been around since the beginning of workstations, and no one has ever done anything smart to do that. Maybe minus, and this is, I mean, maybe minus a couple. There are a couple that maybe have moved towards this because they had to. GarageBand for iPad is one of them. It was a smart design because it was a limited design and it had to work without just having endless resources because it was a closed system. All of a sudden, iPads can do whatever, and they've never really updated it. But at the beginning, there was like, ooh, they've streamlined a few things that we don't have to think about anymore. Awesome. And it worked. So it's possible. But they seem like, what is their damage that they can't see that some of those things would just be smarter to give us at least a toggle, right? That says, do it this way or do it that way. Handle all of my latency for me based on what you see me doing. Okay, awesome. We'll handle all your latency for you while we see what you're doing. That's a smart use of some of these really cool, innovative technologies. Not necessarily taking away all the creative stuff. I would love to see someone do a study where they put a bunch of people into a room with Logic Pro and the session players and have them learn how to use them and then listen to all the music that comes out at the other side and see how much of it sounds the same. Because those tools guide you in what they want to sound like. Does that make sense? That they're guiding you by putting in place these like patterns and tools and processes. And so if you're not careful, you're going to end up on the other side of a project and have it sound like you use those tools. Those tools are also capable of sounding very unique and creative and different if you know how to use them. So you have to get like past the point. And that's one of the things so far that I've really liked about the Logic AI version of this is that they aren't, sure, the first like 15, 20% made up percentage of the time you're going to sound like everybody else because you're figuring out how to use them. And that's why some people complain about them because they're like, well, these all sound hokey. Well, yeah, you just opened the front cover of a book and read one paragraph. So once you get in under the hood and actually master these tools, you could use them in such a way that people would be like, oh, like who played the piano on that? Or who's your, what's the bass thing you got going on? They don't have to sound so obvious because those tools are really deep. What I'm afraid of, it's like the Suno model where you don't get to control any of that. You're stuck with you're stuck with a really simple interface giving you complex results. And you can't go back in and say, hey, that's great. The Suno Studio a little bit, but even that, not so much. Like you're still stuck with that model. They just expanded it in a creative way that makes it look like you have a lot of control, but you really don't. You don't get to go in there and say, hey, I want you to modulate a bar 35 to a different key. Maybe someday it'll do that. But currently, I don't believe you can give it that level of direction. You can't say, hey, for the drums, can you switch out the kick drum with a larger kick? Maybe make it like this brand name or something. You can't do that. And so those are the models that I don't like. I don't like the ones where it has the simple interface and the complex output. I'd much rather have what we have with the session players in Logic, which work immediately, but are very deep and complicated to actually get what you want. That forces us to actually create and actually use our brain and our soul to make something. still at the expense of maybe a drummer or a bass player or a keyboard player. But if you're able to do something with what you have and get to the point where people are listening to you and you have a career, it's unlikely that you're going to continue down that path the entire time where you're never using other musicians. We humans crave collaboration with other people most of the time. There are some of us that don't. I know, for instance, I know people who really don't crave working with other people, and that's 100% okay. And I love that there are tools and experiences for people who really don't want to be in the same room collaborating with people. I see this as a professor with students. If I ever assign group work, there are always a few students that come to me afterwards, begging is the wrong word, but in their way, pleading, not at first realizing that I totally get it and we're going to make it work. But they are like, I can't do this. I can't work with people. That's not who I am. That's not what I do. And if I take a hard line and say, well, you're in a school, you have to, I don't think that's always healthy either. And so there are people who really don't thrive in a collaborative experience. But I would say the majority of humans in some way or another crave that interaction and collaboration. And so we're moving in that direction. These tools then become either, ooh, it's 1 a.m., I have an idea, let me jot it down and make this song. Or it's, I'm poor, have no money to hire people, but I still want to make music, and these tools will give me good results. Or I'm rich and cheap and don't want to pay somebody. Right? So we have all these different scenarios. Hopefully, the majority of people who use these tools use them at the beginning, and then they move out and get the resources to actually interact and collaborate and have that experience. But I don't think that they're inherently bad. I just think that it's a slippery slope. And so that's some of the issues we're dealing with that. So Lander buys reason. And the other thing we talked about at the very beginning, for those just joining, we talked a little bit about the Logic Pro rumor that was created by Gemini. Created, I say in quotes, because I would love to see the original prompt that person put into it and what came out, and verify that it's not them just starting a rumor, because I haven't seen any evidence in any other places of it, of the reworking of retro synth and the ES2, which let me go over to those real quick. Let's see, we have there we go. So the ES2 synthesizer has been around for a bit. It was the follow-up to, and I'll pull up this one too, because this one is the one when I was in school that everyone thought was revolutionizing the world of software. And this synth was such a big deal. It had made waves that we had software synths that could do things. ES1. And it's like lime green glory here. Still does cool stuff. I mean, it's still powerful. I don't know. Did they do? Yeah, so this is the original. It hasn't really been maybe minor updated since then. I was looking to see if we could do the mono mode. So this one is full MPE compatible right here. And I think the issue that I was reading was that due to its sound engine, which is limiting, because this has been around long enough that computers were not great, not as great as they are now. And boy, wouldn't it be awesome if we could take advantage of, the full neural network when doing this. Now, the neural network is a bit of a mystery. It's one of the reasons why I wish I could talk to the team behind Logic. I would have so many questions about what they've done. Chroma Glow is one that they have been so ambiguous about in the documentation. Chroma Glow, by the way, is a video. I'm going to be making a video about it this week, I think. maybe next week. But I want to revisit it now that we've had it for a bit and actually look at why it is so good. And maybe some of the reasons why it's limited to silicon only. We don't know the full reason it is. It seems to me that most of what it does could have been done without the neural network connection. But we have some theories about that, and I've done a lot of research on it. But this sound engine is limited to what could be done like decades ago, right? It's been around long enough, and it had to be efficient. It had to cut corners of, what it could do. It really needed some different filters on the output and different oversampling capabilities. And it's like I can hear this instrument's oscillators as being fully digital. There's no hiding the fact that this is like an early digital synthesizer. It's still awesome. It's a vector synth, which is pretty rare. Means when you do the vectors here, you set up different parameters on the vectors, and then it rotates through them in different ways, depending on how you set it. And so this thing can do a lot of really cool rhythmic things that other synthesizers couldn't do. You don't see too many just vector synths around right now. This is one of them. So there's a valuable place in our workflow to still have this thing. The interface is so clunky in some ways and so brilliant in others. Like our little matrix area here, all these little boxes. For any of you who've been using Logic for a long time, you'll recognize the matrix boxes. They were what we had on the EXS24. We have it on this. They're around. And it's nice sometimes to have a unified matrix style thing, because then I don't have to relearn a matrix type thing every time I open up a different instrument. And so you get your target modulation, your source for that modulation, and then something that goes through the via. And so you can manipulate that. And you have these little sliders on the side to say how much and what are the ranges. Efficient, if not simplistic. It's great. And you could see how many we had. There were quite a few. The design here is not the issue. Maybe the graphic interface is a little bit of the issue. Can I make it bigger? No, I guess I can't make it any bigger. I can make it smaller. There you go. That's the max. But it had almost everything that we would need, including cool little animations. If I wanted to put this into parallel mode, anytime you can visually help someone doing synthesizer work, I think it's a great thing, because now we know that the sound is going through these two filters side by side, and you can blend between them. Or I want them to go into the first one and then into the second one before going on. Signal flow in this design, brilliant. Maybe we could update it though and make this a little bit easier. What would I change? I think a little bit more contrast. Apple or the Logic team loves horribly contrasted interfaces of things. They're like, let's put a gray background. Like look up here where the distortion is. Let me zoom in for a second. Where it says distortion 0 to full. And it's like distortion is one shade of gray over another shade of gray next to another shade of gray. I mean, come on. Not everyone is young who's using this thing. I bet you people don't use this because they look at it and they're like, I can't even read what it's doing. It's the same down here. It's like the whole interface goes a little darker gray to help look like it's rounded, but then it gets so close you barely read those words in the bottom. And it's like I'm old, but I'm not that old, but I'm still, geez, I guess I need to go to the eye doctor. It's a pain in the butt. So cool. That rumor about the sound engine says that they're going to add a button that's going to change us to a new sound engine based on the neural network that'll give us much higher fidelity replications of analog synthesis, but that you can turn it off so that you can still use this in old projects without having screwed things up. Most of the time, and I don't blame them, most of the time, the Logic team doesn't go back and fix old things. It's not practical. It's not practical because it messes everybody else's projects that are old up. And one thing that is guaranteed is that all of us have projects that we're going to open up at some point that we worked on 2, 5, 10 years ago. And if everything's different in the engine, then we're totally hosed. Some things have changed, though. The EQs have gotten better. We don't have, sure. So let me explain what I mean by that. We have like the channel EQ. And since the very first time it was released, it sounds a little bit different than it does now. Same with like the pitch correction. From the very first time the pitch corrector was released, it actually sounds quite a bit different now. And part of that is if you just use the basic. But let's go to pitch correction. This is one of the most obvious because you can see it says neural pitch detection, right? You can turn that off. And that's the button they're talking about adding to these other tools, this random rumor. I still think even without the neural pitch detection, I still think this sounds better. Sounds a little bit cleaner, a little less artifacts. Same with flex pitch in time. Those don't sound the same as when they were first released. So things have morphed, but I don't want to do that. Let's go back up to this. ES2. This thing sounds the same. I don't think it would hurt them to actually change the engine of this. Most of the things would still sound okay, and it would be better enough that it would be good for earlier projects, but having a toggle would be okay. So we have this, and the other one that this rumor specifically talked about was retro synth, which is a newer synth. And a lot of people like this synth. Raise your hand in the chat if this is a synth that you've ever used and like it. I think it sounds really good, but I can hear it. I don't think that this synth sounds small, though. That may be some of the things that people were saying. I think if you don't know how to use it, there's potential for it to sound small, but I don't think naturally it does. Part of it is understanding the unison options and the voice detune. And like actually getting under the hood and knowing what some of these things do. Again, almost all of making any of our tools sound good come down to putting the time into learning how they work, what they do, and how to get the most out of them. That's the thing that is most of the time the limiting factor for most people to make things sound good. It's the same with Reason. For those who say Reason isn't a serious workstation, they probably have never used it enough time to actually use it in a serious way. For those who say that retro synth isn't a serious synth that doesn't sound good, maybe they should look in the mirror with some of this stuff, because these tools, many of them, can do almost everything you would need. And most of the time, the argument falls apart. Because they're like, well, it's not going to sound like a real analog synthesizer. Well, your analog synthesizer most of the time doesn't sound like itself anyway, unless you're listening to it directly to an amp and to a speaker with no digital part of the chain at all in the way. The minute you convert it into Logic or something, there's no difference. It's ones and zeros, just the same as this one is. And so at that point, it's all about learning how to use and recreate the sounds or get the sounds you want, not so much that a tool is inherently better because it was digital or analog. Because most of the time, we're not hearing the analog stuff. You can't listen to, this is a thing that I have right now. I rarely buy new vinyl. I don't like new vinyl. If something has been on streaming, it's likely that it was all recorded digitally in some way or another. It's very rare. There was an album a while ago. Oh, piano player. Man, that was when I was first teaching though. So it's been like 20 years. It was like the last one that I could think that was like full analog all the way, but we listened to it on a CD, right? And so we don't get to hear that in an analog way. I prefer old vinyl that went through the whole analog from beginning until end and was pressed onto vinyl, but never ever saw the digital world. Those are the vinyl that I personally collect. I love hearing things in a way that you can't hear them when you get like a digital copy of it. Easy. But this thing's cool. This synth, by the way, has a wavetable and an FM synthesizer built into this. I mean, this thing, if they were to do that with this rumor saying and give this the neural engine access so that we could have low latency, oversampling that is like really high oversampling. Don't ask me to talk about some of these concepts in more detail. But to get rid of the effect of aliasing in the digital signal path. And more importantly, to give us the filters that act like real filters. This is one of the areas that I do agree. So if they were to put Chroma Glow as the filter area, right? That would be life-changing because what we often hear isn't so much the actual original oscillator, maybe with the wavetable, because it's a little different than just having an oscillator, but it's the filter that it goes through that becomes so important. For a long time in the transition between analog synthesis and digital synthesis, they found out that they could put in digital oscillators, digitally controlled oscillators, and then digital oscillators, and that it would be just as good and huge and fat as long as they put in an analog filter section, right? Because the original stuff recreated a little looping thing over and over and over, simple to recreate to a certain degree, but the filters are different. The filters act different at high frequencies, mid frequencies, low frequencies, how hard they're driven, all of those different things that go into an analog filter sounding like an analog filter are actually more difficult to replicate in a digital world without the processing power. And so what we have is, a lesser version of what a filter is on these instruments. But now we've seen the playbook to a certain degree. The playbook being that now we have Chroma Glow. And Chroma Glow, for all of the ambiguity of what it is, and it is pretty ambiguous, meaning they say it's built off of studio gear, but they never told us what the studio gear was. Just make a behind the scenes video on how you made this. Gosh darn it. Like, what is the secrecy about not telling us the tools that you use to make something? You can still copyright it, and if someone copies it, sue the pants off of them, unless this is all, open tech and they just don't want people to know how they made it exactly. So the mystery of it is more important than the actual thing. That's total BS. Just tell us which things you made. Be proud of the process you used making this instead of so secretive about it. There's no reason for it. I'm still going to use it if you tell me about it. Matter of fact, unless it's a compromised system that sucks behind the scenes, and maybe the mystery of it just makes it sound good to me, which is always a possibility, then here we go, right? This is what I actually foresee now for one of the next versions of Logic. I've been asking myself that question for months. I don't think, maybe a session guitarist, which I would love. That's the only session instrument I really want next. The horn section and the string section are coming if a guitar comes. Those are the three that I can see Apple feeling like they want to add. Maybe a vocalist, if they bought a vocal company that does vocal synthesis. I'm not talking about AI synthesized voices. That's actually one of the biggest misnomers right now. You see a lot of companies doing what they are calling AI voices. IK Multimedia uses AI a lot, kind of in theirs, but it's not. It's not an AI voice. It's a different system that uses actual voices that are converted. Synthesizer V from Dreamtonics is a synthesized voice using real voices. It uses AI only in changing parameters around just to give you some alternatives. But the actual voice itself, not an AI voice. And they paid those people, and I hope they paid them well. But they just got really good at taking all of the recordings of the voices and putting them together in the ways that we tell them, MIDI controlled. I mean, that's really good programming. That's not AI. That's like a genius in Japan who is really good at what he does with his team. But back to what I was saying, what I think Apple is going to do next with Logic, what Logic is likely to come out with. It's going to come out with some new drums. That's like every update. It's an inside joke with me and Apple. They're going to come out with some new loops and some new producer banks, right? That's what they do every time. Okay, we got that out of the way. This is going to be put into a lot of things. Guaranteed. It has to be. Because what they did with Chroma Glow is so good. They just needed the power to do it. The ideas have all been around forever. We all knew or know how this inherently works, right? Instead of a blanket EQ stage on something, meaning that no matter what the input is, we just boost a little bit or cut a little bit, and then we hope it sounds like an analog piece of gear. That's not how analog gear works, it turns out. Turns out that analog gear works by in a variety of ways. So a low frequency sound comes in, it's a little different than a high frequency sound. Or a very loud, overdriven signal is different than a soft one. I mean, they push the electronics differently. Sometimes because of the heat of the system physically warms up and it's different. If we're using tubes, those tubes will work different if they're new or an old design. If we're pushing to tape, which is a non-linear experience. In fact, when we were recording to tape, we were always taught, you need to hit the sweet spot where it's the most linear for most things. Because if you do too soft, it's not linear. If you push it too hard, it's not linear. So what goes onto the tape isn't what comes off of it. And it turns out that when you go hotter for some things, like drums or even a bass, that the thing that comes off different sounds pleasant. And so it's like as those little iron particles on the tape get realigned by the magnets, and the magnets are non-linear, and the tape is a non-linear format, and you push it, it gives it a flavor that you don't get anywhere else. You don't get that by just putting a single filter, EQ, match filter, whatever on this thing. It has to analyze what's going in and then do something different for everything that it lines up with. So now we get a complex system that actually looks detailed at what's coming in moment by moment and then pushes it out. Sure, they probably could have made this to work on an Intel computer, but it would have to, insane amount of processing to do that real time across every frequency of every instrument, of every track, right? It's a big task. So they finally said, you know what, we got this neural thing happening. We can send it to there. It doesn't affect the CPU as much. Now we have ChromaGlow, which really starts to do that. I don't think it's a perfect system. I think at any point along the way here, we're still compromised. But the fact that it's doing any of those things has brought it further along than most other things. Has less compromise and more amazing output. So I bet you we're going to see more of these models. So we have the old tube, the new tube, the tape, the squeeze, which is like an analog compressor that gets pushed hard, and then an analog preamp, which tends to be bright and brittle and focus the odd harmonics. We have these things, but what else could we have with this? Once they have a system in place, they could say, you know what? Let's do like an old cassette deck. Let's do what it sounds like for vinyl. Let's do an old like fast food restaurant microphone and speaker system. Let's start doing this not just for these particular models, but let's also do this with our guitar amps. That's one of the biggest problems right now, in my opinion, with our amps and pedals. So the amp designer is the old way of doing this. Yes, it has a model. So all of these things, and it has the amp, and it has the cab, and it has a mic, but none of them, as far as I can tell, someone correct me if I'm wrong, I've been wrong plenty of times, but none of them are analyzing the input signal and changing the output based on what's happening at the level of what ChromaGlow does. So the amp designer, I hope they have assigned somebody to go through and pull all these amps back and do the same process they did for ChromaGlow in with the amp designer, so that when you play a guitar, depending on what you're doing, it's going to be slightly different. And it would be so smart for them to be like, have a little timer and shows how long this thing's been on. And the longer it's on, it shifts over time. I mean, how freaking genius would that be? Everybody would turn their head and be like, okay, maybe this is time to use the amp designer in Logic. Instead of, the amp designer in Logic. It looks cool, but whoa, there are some limitations. It doesn't sound like my guitar amp. It doesn't sound like a guitar amp. Same thing, of course, would be for the pedal board, right? All the stomp boxes. It's like, yeah, this thing, I'm sure, uses like old tech to some degree because they don't sound, they don't get out of the way. The sound of a lot of these pedals get in the way and not out of the way. When I use ChromaGlow, it's not that it disappears. It doesn't. But I use it and I think, okay, that was subtle. And then I have to like push it hard to make it do a sound, but it's subtle. It's interacting with the music. And sometimes I realize the reason it's subtle is because the music feeding it is subtle. And it's just doing the thing. But they really nailed this, in my opinion. I just want more. Isn't that the story for all this stuff? I just want more. I want more of what this does. I want those other things that I mentioned. Sure, we have each of these models. We have a couple styles. We can bypass below frequencies, which is really smart. But in my opinion, the advanced feature of this comes down with the low cut and the high cut, because you can do the low cut, high cut pre or post. So you can actually say, like, I want to sculpt this and then chroma glow it, or I'm going to chroma glow it and then sculpt the output for both the highs and the lows. That's how we would have thought. That's how we would have thought with any of our analog equipment in the studio. Do I need to put this through an EQ to get it ready for this other thing? When I'm going to tape, we would sit in the studio with our old big fat analog and Allen and Heath console that this one studio loves so much, and it had limited EQ, and we were going to tape, so we would EQ it one way the first time to tape and then do the second way when it came back. And the first way was to help optimize it for the tape, and the second way was to make it sound like we wanted it to. Cool. If you really feel like you need more than this, then just put one of the other filters afterwards. But yeah, drive it up, drive it down. Otherwise, it's simple. Whew. This chroma glow this concept could go in almost any of the other effects. This concept should be in all of our synthesizers, especially the ones that claim to be retro and want to emulate analog, right? It should go into, I'm sure there's already a part of this that is mastering assistant ready. I say that because this is going to do a little mastering thing. If you're in Rosetta or on Intel, you don't get all of these options for the character. The ones that are not available on Intel or in Rosetta are the ones that are likely using the chroma glow type thing, because it's requiring the neural network stuff, right? And so it should be there. It should be inside of our compressor and EQs. I think it would really help some of our, let's see, I'm in the wrong place. Let's go to here. Our vintage EQ collection, right? So we have the vintage tube EQ, which overall gets about a 5 out of 10 for me. It's okay. It matches the Pultec type controls. It just doesn't, there's something about it. It's not as usable as a Pultec. And that's partly because I think it's just doing everything. It isn't aware of what's coming in to make it sound like a Pultec would actually push it out. If that makes sense. Again, part of this is when I'm trying to be fast, maybe some of that's on me, user error, because we do have, again, the controls here. Like we can make the drive, we can change the drive going down. But I wonder if we had the chroma glow style drive on this, how much better that would be. And if it is the exact same, then why the heck can this run on Intel and Rosetta and chroma glow can't? You know what I mean? So I'm assuming, making some big assumptions, but that these models are kind of an old school way of doing it, adding in coloration across the board, no matter what the input is. And that's just not exactly how a Pultec would have worked. If you pushed it harder or less, if you pushed the bands harder or less, and it was, a low frequency or high frequency or really muddy signal, it was always just ever so slightly different. And so those nuances, without them, this thing sounds more sterile. You might as well just use the channel EQ most of the time. Not going to lie. Ooh, rant time. Rant. We've been going for an hour and 4 minutes. do I think Reason is going to become one of the competitors for the top DAW spot now that Lander has bought them? No, I doubt it. But I'm excited to see what happens. I'll be eating my popcorn over here, seeing if they're going to ruin it or let it be ruined, or if this is the end of the Reason era or beginning of something new. I want to believe that the team at Lander cares about music, like actually really cares about it, and not just about keeping their investors happy. The minute we start caring about investors, we all see what happens. Apple cares about investors. They do this big thing where they care about people too, I think, on some levels, in the way when my son runs down the stairs in his socks and he slips and falls every time he does it, that I tell him to stop doing it because I don't want to have to take him to the emergency room. Not because I don't want him to feel the pain. I mean, I don't want him to feel pain, but I also just imagine myself at 9:00 at night having to drive over to the emergency room, and that's a pain for everybody. That's what some of these companies feel like when they're trying to do this stuff where they care about their investors instead of just having the freedom to create. In some ways, what I would do if I had an AI that was capable of making an entire program for me. This is going to sound maybe strange, but if I had an artificial intelligence coder that could do anything I tell it to, I would say to it, hey, every morning I'd get up and be like, make me a digital audio workstation and have it do this, this, and this. And let it be something I'd give it some, parameters or whatever, but it's I would love to have a workstation that it made for me that is different than everything else and lets me create using tools that are different every time. That would be the creative thing I think that I would enjoy out of something like that, where I didn't have to use a tool that is clearly crafted by people who have a bottom line in mind. Which means probably I should get an acoustic instrument and just play in my living room and have fun for the enjoyment of music rather than anything else. But sometimes I do that. I got this cool old reed organ that my grandpa used to use. It's like a small box and it folds out. So it folds out into an organ. And I love playing that thing. I mean, it's so unique and different and unexpected. And the sound fills the air and there's no electricity. You pump it with your feet. I think every one of us should get an instrument that doesn't require electricity at some point and just play with it like a kid would. That's what I think we should do. Well, I think this is a great time. Any last thoughts from anybody? Yes. Michael, you were on the stream yesterday where we did a little jazz AI. It was horrible. Suno can actually do it better, but it doesn't know what it's doing. It's just doing something based on something. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of soul involved. Any other thoughts from anybody before we close this down? Thanks for letting me rant a little bit. We're going to get back to useful programming here shortly. Because I do feel like there's a lot about logic we have to learn. and use, but I want to find a way. Let me pass this by those of you who are here on the stream right now. If I were to ever like open up a Zoom call and then post a link someplace and then stream the Zoom call live onto YouTube, but those who were in the Zoom call could ask questions or share music, would that be even more interesting than streams, or would you just prefer to be able to put a stream on in the background and listen? Which way is the preferred way that you would do? Would you like the interaction of a Zoom call, or just is the interaction of the chat box on a live stream enough for you? I'll give you like 10 seconds to reply to that question. I'm not going to do a poll or anything. I could, but that seems like a lot of work for a simple question. And Jamal says they're going back to Fat EQ. It's there. It is definitely there. It's not here, but if you hold down the Option key, Legacy, EQ, Fat EQ is still here. There you go. You can go back to it. It can do everything you need. Just doesn't sound as good. I should go back through my files and figure out where my I should find out what my oldest Logic project is that I have still around. I should find out. Plastodon, you made it. I know you said you were listening, but yeah, ironies. I don't know. I'm kind of still on the stream. Kind of still in the stream mood these days. I need to up the streaming game a little bit. The algorithm doesn't show my streams to as many people as it used to on YouTube, but sometimes I just rant and don't change camera angles, and we just look at Logic the whole time, and that's fine, but it would be cool to get some additional viewers on here every once in a while. Ooh. Cool. Yeah. This is probably a good time. I'm going to go pick up my car from the shop. Right before Christmas, somebody rear-ended me at a red light. I was just parked at minding my own business. Luckily, not too much damage. Beard cam. Yes. We could just do the beard cam. Here, I don't have it hooked up. I have another camera that I have movable around. We could do that now, but we're not going to. Okay. Thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. This has been an hour and 13 minutes of my life I can never get back. Yeah. I've given up on asking for the browser. It'll come when they're ready. It's like the one on the iPad version is better, but it's still not perfect. So if they brought us that browser, would it give us everything we wanted? I don't know. Okay, cool. See everybody later. We're supposed to get a snowstorm here tomorrow. So if that's the case, then either tomorrow or Friday, I will be streaming out of boredom while the snow falls around us. So I'll try to give you a little bit more warning, Plastodon, but no promises. Sometimes I don't know I'm going to do it until I'm doing it. Okay, see you later.